Hello, welcome to this month's nutrition education video. My name is Alusha Ganajabade from the Nutrition Services team from the Marion County Public Health Department. This month, today's topic will be gardening for our health. And what I'm trying to communicate in this video would be some of the benefits for gardening. So it's how we can positively impact our health through gardening. Learn about various community resources that are available for you that you may find beneficial. And also, I would like to share a recipe that applies various ingredients that you may or may not already have in your garden, but they're easily sourced. What this video will not be would be a intro or a master gardener class for various gardening techniques. There are many people who have better resources for that that you can get. So, just a very brief introduction as to what you might think gardening is and why it's important for us to even maybe pick this up as a hobby. If I were to ask you, like, what is gardening? And in simple terms, it's just pretty much laying out and caring for plants and flowers. So it's just creating a space that is dedicated to plant growth and flower growth. So sometimes people may ask, is this a science or an art? And the answer is, why not both? We can look at it from both perspectives, where arranging plants in a harmonious way in their surroundings could be looked at as art, and you can look at it as science from the perspective of following the principles and techniques for plant cultivation. So it can definitely be both art and science, and there's ways we can definitely benefit from gardening as a whole. So just ask yourself, do you garden? And if you do, why do you? And if you don't, you can also ask yourself, why don't you? And is it something you might want to pick up as a hobby, or something to get you involved? So there are numerous gardening resources that you may or may not be aware of. For example, the Indianapolis Public Library has a seed library here, where you can go to your local library branch and get some seeds to get you started on your gardening resources. Purdue Extension Education Store also has lots of information regarding gardening and how to get started on that. Or even if you're already a master gardener, there's different levels of gardening nutrition education resources. So what are some of the benefits of gardening, especially in regards to our health? There are four main types that I will talk about, but this list is not exhaustive. So I will talk about the physical benefits of gardening. For example, the physical activity we can get, especially while we're out there in our garden, no matter if it's large or small. The nutritional benefits, which you may already have guessed, especially when it comes to growing our own plants, our vegetables and herbs. And also the connection with nature that we can also get from gardening. Being out there and just being in the field or being in our garden provides lots of connectivity with nature. And lastly, the social benefits that we also get while gardening. For example, community gardens, if you think about that. So those are some of the gardening benefits that I'll mention here moving forward. So when it comes to the physical benefits of gardening, you may ask, now, gardening may not be as intense as being in the gym lifting weights. However, the CDC does classify or consider gardening as a moderate intensity physical activity. And with the goal or the recommendation of meeting 2.5 hours per week of moderate intensity activity, gardening is a phenomenal way to get or meet these goals, and even most likely exceed these goals. If you think about it, when it comes to gardening, you are using your full body to be active. So you're most likely bending down, squatting. You're picking things up. You're also working on your grip strength when you're using your hands frequently. And you're able to be more active, standing, moving around. And that can be a great way to help increase your physical activity levels. It is also known that with physical activity going up, this also can help reduce your risks for other health issues such as obesity, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and other heart disease or other health complications. So gardening is a phenomenal way, once again, to increase your physical activity and be able to reap some of these benefits for our health. When it comes to your nutritional benefits, as mentioned, I usually ask people, do you have a preference for fresh produce over frozen or canned? And most likely people do say yes. And the reason is fresh produce is something that does have very good texture, good taste. And with this being said, many people are also more aware about, preservatives in food and other things such as pesticides. So gardening is a great way to improve the quality of the food that you do consume, especially when you're growing your own produce that does not necessarily have, things mentioned such as those pesticides or preservatives. In the case of if it's fresh, it has that good texture, and it does not have, it's not necessarily preserved with lots of sodium, especially compared to the canned options. Now, does this mean only consuming fresh items is the way to go? Not necessarily. So if it's based off what you can afford and what works best for you. But absolutely, if you do have the means to grow a garden and grow certain vegetables that you prefer, that is a phenomenal way to be able to get some of those benefits. And also, um, the likelihood of consuming more fruits and vegetables increases whenever you are growing that. I don't know anyone that would like to grow their own fruits and vegetables and not consume them. And you most likely will even share them with those that you love. So, nutritional benefits for gardening is abundant, especially when you think of how whenever you grow your own plants, your herbs and vegetables, more likely you're going to consume more of those vegetables and herbs. You're also more likely to, or less likely to consume foods that have been highly processed with lots of sodium or sugar. And then I'll talk about some of the mental benefits. So this is more of like the social connection or the connectivity. And with the mental benefits, there has been some bacteria found in soil that could help with our relief stress in the sense that it could trigger the release of serotonin, which could help for stress or anxiety. It also has those anti-inflammatory properties for the brain. There was an experiment done with 30 gardeners where they were exposed to a high stress event, and then half were were informed to sorry, half were informed to go into a state for indoor reading, while the other half were told to go outdoor gardening. And if you can guess which group out of the two were later tested to see what their stress levels were, which one was lower, it was the group that was doing the outdoor gardening. Now, does this automatically mean that outdoor gardening is a cure for stress, anxiety? No, that is not what it means. However, there are benefits for being outdoors and also getting some of those physical activities and stress relief benefits. And also, being outdoors while gardening exposes many people to vitamin D, which a lot of people are also very deficient in. And access or, being outside and getting this vitamin D can also help with many nutrients that many people are deficient in. And lastly, another huge benefit for gardening would be the community benefit. And in this case, community gardens are they're critical for bringing neighbors together, especially, and also beautifying the community. So there are many instances where schools, community centers have their gardens, even neighborhoods or apartments have their gardens where people can share their resources, share their yields. And also, when I say resources, this also means education, where you teach your neighbor how to, plant certain things. And with that being said, there's more of that relationship being built as a community. So community gardens, or gardens in general, do help build stronger communities. They help with the passing of knowledge, and you're also able to share some of these items with your neighbors. And by doing this, you're also helping them improve or increase their fruit and vegetable intake. And with this being said, this could also benefit their nutrition and health. So these are just some of the benefits that I mentioned regarding gardening. And as I mentioned here, it is not an exhaustive list. There are numerous other benefits that you can get from gardening, but these are just some of the key ones where you can think about it as the physical activity that we can get from gardening, the nutritional benefits, especially when we are consuming less processed foods with sodium and sugar, and also the mental benefits, especially as a stress reliever or anxiety reducing method, and also for the community benefits, how we can beautify our neighborhoods and interact with people and get some of those social connections with our neighbors. So these are some of the benefits of gardening, and I hope you are able to see this and think about picking up gardening as a hobby if you don't already have one. Thank you so much for your time, and this has been Olusegun Ajibade from the Marion County Public Health Department, Nutrition Services. The very first step for this recipe, which is the farmer's market pasta salad, would be to boil your water and then cook your pasta. For this, I'm using the 100% whole grain penne pasta, and the reason why I choose this recipe, this pasta, would be to be able to get lots of that whole grain. Many Americans do not meet the recommendations for whole grain, and whole grain is very rich in fiber, which fiber is very good for our digestive health. That helps out a lot. So choosing the whole grain option would be a good way to get lots of fiber into our nutrition. And this recipe also has lots of vegetables and some fruit in there, so that also has lots of fiber in there too. But substituting for whole grain pasta is a good option for you to consider. And while my pasta is cooking, I'm just going to make this Parmesan vinaigrette here. You can buy your own Parmesan vinaigrette, but this one has a very easy and quick recipe that you can make, and it also has less ingredients, I'm sure, compared to what you buy in the stores. So the ingredients for this would be Parmesan cheese, some olive oil, white wine vinegar, Dijon mustard, minced garlic, and some sugar. So I will go ahead and combine all those ingredients into my bowl here and whisk it up while the pasta is boiling. First, I'll add a 1/3 cup of the grated Parmesan cheese. And then I'm going to add some of my white wine vinegar, and that would just be 2 tablespoons. Next, I will add my olive oil, which will be 3 tablespoons. And I find this to be a very easy way to add lots of flavor to the recipe. And the 3rd one. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of our minced garlic. You can cook your own minced garlic fresh. However, for this, I will be using already minced garlic. So bear with me. And then it also calls for 1 tablespoon of sugar. I'm sorry, 1 teaspoon of sugar. I'm careful with that. And 1/2 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And now I'm going to just mix everything together. And then I'll set this aside for when the pasta and all the ingredients are mixed together. So, as I mentioned, this recipe has lots of ingredients loaded with fiber, especially our vegetables and some herbs here. So, for this, we have our green onions. I also have bell pepper, zucchini, and some cilantro. I do like mentioning that you can always substitute some of these ingredients, especially for the fresh or maybe canned items. So for example, in this recipe, we do use our canned corn, but if you would like to use fresh corn, by all means go with that. So I'm just going to chop up some of our green onions here. And you can cut them to the size you prefer. I like mine medium sized. And once I get this to where I need them to be, I can just add them into my big bowl. They're all going into the same place. Next, I'll just chop up some of my bell peppers. And I also like to have some of my bell peppers be different sizes, just to give it a little bit of character in the recipe. And next, I'll just cut up our zucchini. And I'm going to cut this into half moons. And lastly, I will use up our cherry tomatoes, and I'll just cut them into halves. And once I'm done, I'll just add them all into my bowl. And cherry tomatoes, also grape tomatoes. The reason why I like this recipe is there's so many vitamins and minerals in these ingredients. So our tomatoes have lots of vitamin C and beta carotenes, which are good for our immune system. And also the bell peppers with the fiber and vitamin C's too. There are numerous ingredients here with lots of, benefits, especially with the herbs that I'll be discussing here soon. So right now I have substituted some items. What I have on my chopping board is our canned sliced peaches, and it's always good to make sure you're paying attention to see for either no salt added or no sugar added. Considering it's not yet fresh peaches time. I don't know where you live, but I don't live in Georgia. But you can always substitute, and for a summertime, whenever peaches are in season, by all means use the fresh option, but for right now I'll be using the canned option, and this one is the no sugar added choice. So I'm just going to cut up some into smaller bite-sized pieces, but it depends on your preference. So if you like it a little bit bigger, by all means you can chop it up to the size that you prefer. And I'm just going to add some into the bowl that already has most of my ingredients. And this just comes along very easy. And peaches are a very great
fruit, especially during the summertime. And I like to think of this recipe as a very good summer recipe, especially with all the items listed in there. And so that being said, and this kind of gives it a different, sweeter flavor. So has a mixture of flavors in there. And also here I have our canned corn. If you also are able to grow your own corn and use the fresh option, maybe even grilling your corn a little bit, that would also be great. However, I am using the canned corn, the sweet golden corn, but also making sure there's no salt added. That's the option I choose. And a quick tip that you might want to also consider is rinsing and draining the ingredients in a can, especially if it has some, like, sodium or any preservatives in there. That could reduce it by up to about 40%. So that's something you might even want to consider, especially when you are being conscious of your sodium levels. So I'm just going to go ahead and add these items into my bowl here. And right here on my chopping board, I have everyone's favorite fresh cilantro. Usually many people, if you like cilantro, you love it. And if you don't, you don't. However, this is, optional. And I'm just going to try and chop this up to the best of my ability into finer pieces. And I'm also going to add basil in here. And the reason why these are in this recipe is herbs are very easy to grow, especially basil in your garden. So it's a very easy way to get, and they're very resilient too, especially to the weather. And you're able to have lots of flavor into your meals without necessarily also increasing your salt or your sodium intake. So this is a great way to flavor your food while watching out for the sodium you're incorporating in your meals. So I'm just going to add our cilantro to the bowl, and it gives it a nice pop of color. And next I'm going to add our basil, and just a 1/3 cup of basil. And you can do that to your own preference. Alright, now this recipe also calls for some sort of protein. I am using the canned chicken breast here. However, if you do want to make your own shredded chicken at home, by all means use that. Another substitute you might also want to consider would be, let's say, shrimp, or maybe even tuna. So I'm going to add our chicken breast in here. And I'm going to mix all our ingredients in this bowl here so that everything just goes well together. And then I'm going to add our cooked pasta that's already been drained. And mix that up once again before I add the final ingredient in there. And now lastly, our Parmesan vinaigrette that was made earlier, I will be adding that. And then I'll give it a final mix to get all those flavors there marinated. And this is the Farmer's Market pasta salad. As I mentioned, you can always try and substitute some ingredients in there. Choose the fresh option if you prefer that and have those available. Or you can also use the canned. Just make sure you look out for the no salt added or the no sugar added options. And also maybe even add in some more items in there. So our chicken breast, you can cook yours. Or you can also substitute for maybe, let's say, shrimp. And you can add more vegetables in there, so maybe using orange bell peppers or green bell peppers to add more color in there. The more items that you're using, especially for our vegetables, the more you're getting that fiber that is very important for our digestive health. And fiber also keeps you full for a much longer period of time, which means you're not feeling like you are hungry more frequently. So fiber is very important for our nutrition, and that's why we use the whole grain penne pasta, but you can also use any type of pasta that you do even prefer in a sense. But whole grain would be a very good option for you. And this is the recipe, so thank you all for your time.